Hello, my name is Bernard Beale, and I'm your host of the podcast series. This series is a special series because we call this Life at its Best. And I can tell you, it doesn't get any better than this because we have the privilege of interviewing a centenarian, someone who I have known literally all of my life. So it's been quite a privilege. And we're going to get into her amazing story. But before we get started, I want to introduce our team members. We have Alexis Salazar, who is our producer, and she's helping us in the background with this program. And we also have Dr. Patti Herring, who is the PhD, and she studies lifestyle, and she's a part of the lifestyle study and also the efforts of working with PhD students at Loma Linda University. And I am so privileged to have Patti as our co-host of this series, especially as we're getting into the lifestyle program. Patti, it is good to see you this morning.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Indeed, indeed. Now, in this series, we're visiting with amazing people who are living life to what I call its fullest. And they have been doing it for 90 to 100 years, Patti. Wow, can you think about that? 90 to 100 years?
I cannot believe it.
Well,
cannot believe it.
It is amazing. Now, Patti, you have been studying, before we get started with Mrs. Wright, you have been studying long livers, and you've been investigating them through all of your work with PhD students and so on. And the Blue Ribbon study, the Adventist Lifestyle Study, you've been involved with this as an investigator. What are some of the things that you have noticed as you're studying these people who have made it through? For us who are younger, and even the younger people, we need to do some things with our lifestyle, and maybe we'll hear some things as we talk to Mrs. Wright. But what are some of the things that you've kind of noticed in your studies?
Well, we've been studying the health of Adventists for over 60 years at Loma Linda, and it's been proven that Adventists live longer, 6 to 7 years longer. And we know it's because of our health message. And like I said, we've been studying it for so long, and others have looked at our lifestyle. Like, we're part of the Blue Zone. You know, Loma Linda's part of that Blue Zone. People that live over 100 years old with good quality of life. Loma Linda's part of that. And so we know that Adventists live longer, but that is based on white California Adventist data in terms of Adventists living 6 to 7 years longer. So now we know with the new Adventist Health Study 2 that we've been undertaking for the last 10, 12 years, that Black Adventists live longer too. So that's why this series is needed and is way overdue, and I'm glad we're doing that. And we have found also that Adventists have less heart disease, less stroke, less diabetes than the general population of people. So we know the Adventist message works.
Wow, you know, that is fantastic. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
So
I'm
we're
so glad
hoping on this stuff.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that because in fact, you know, we're involved right now in society, and there's a lot of things about prejudice and stuff that's taking place, and to some degree, Black people are under the microscope. And to be able to see people who have lived a great life, dignified in many years, it is a privilege and a treasure to our community. And so we're so very, very thankful for this opportunity. Now, Mrs. Wright, we just want to welcome you to be with our series, the Black and Blue series today. Mrs. Wright, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fine.
You're doing fine. You look amazing. And how many years young are you, Mrs. Wright?
102.
102. That is amazing. Did you plan on living that long?
Honestly, I thought about living more than I did dying. So I never thought about dying.
You never thought about dying.
Yes, we all,
That's
I
amazing.
guess we
That's
all
amazing.
do.
That's amazing to hear her say that. You never thought about dying. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, Mrs. Wright, we've been going through your biography, and we're just amazed because I'm looking at actually the 102 years old. That means that when you were a young girl, there were people that were still alive that were former slaves. Did I get that right?
That's true.
Okay, and would you tell us, you have somebody that you knew yourself who was a slave and he was a part of your family. Who was that?
That was my mother's grandpapa. And her mother died when she was 8 months old. And he raised her. Her grandpapa,
Yes.
and he lived with us. In fact, he was living with us when he died.
Mm.
According
And how,
to according to the record, I was about 3 years old when he
yes.
died.
And how old was he when he died?
With slaves, they had no really record. The census, I checked the census, and they had him about 96 when he died.
Wow. So your long living is in your blood.
It's in my genes.
Indeed, indeed. Now, when you were a little girl, life was a little different than it is right now. What was it like? And you grew up in a society that isn't quite like it is today. What was it like then?
Really, back then, when my mother saw she's having a lot of children, they bought some land 3 miles out of the town, 20 acres, and we lived on a small farm. So therefore, we had food to eat, food to give away, milk, butter, sweet potatoes. And in Florida, your greens would grow about the year round. So we had plenty of food. And I learned to share what we had.
You lived off of the land. You ate the food that you grew.
Yes.
You had the cows that were there. You knew what they ate. You saw the chickens were in the yard. So whatever you ate, it was right there and it was really good quality, right?
Right there, right there.
Isn't that amazing? And what about work? What about labor? Did you have to work hard to have those things?
Well, really, both of my parents worked in town. And we owned 20 acres of land. And I had some brothers. I had two brothers younger than me, and two brothers older than me. And they did the farming. I kept house. And of course, my brothers knew how to do anything I knew how to do.
Right.
We had a happy, peaceful family.
Mm.
A peaceful family.
That's fantastic. Patti, what are you noticing here?
Well, I just was wondering, Mrs. Wright, how long have you been Adventist?
Okay. When I was 12 years old, I was baptized in the Methodist church. My parents were Methodists, and they both were faithful church members. when World War II broke out, my husband had to go to the army. And so I finished teaching 1 year and I joined him. The Lord had it that he would be put in the barrack with some Seventh-day Adventists. So my husband was in the barrack with Seventh-day Adventists. And when they studied their Sabbath school lesson, he'd study with them. Back in Florida, at one point he was superintendent of the Sunday school class. So he was religious inclined. So the soldier asked my husband, Brunel, come with your wife and see if we can come and study the Bible with you. And I said, I'd like to be intelligent along biblical lines.
Mm-hmm.
Really, in the Methodist church, there were certain things that would come up and there was no answer. And in the Adventist church, there were some answers. So I had learned to pray and trust the Lord as a Methodist. And I had something I wanted the Lord to do for me. I wanted a baby. And so far, I hadn't gotten a baby. And eventually, the Lord gave me a baby. And when I was baptized in the Adventist church, my baby was baptized with me, Bellevue.
Wow. I did it. That is so amazing. You know, Mrs. Wright, you were studying and you went to Florida A&M College back in the day, and you got your education start there. And then after the war, you and your husband moved over to Oakwood College. How did you get there?
Well, what happened when the war was over, we decided that I'd just stay with him until he went overseas. So we got a place to stay. And the baby was 4 months old when the war was over. And the younger soldiers could be eliminated from the army if they had a job. So my husband was still in his 20s, and the older ones could go, not the young ones. So he couldn't go. Walter Stotts, who baptized us, wrote the president of the university, of the college at that time, and told him about my husband. So he wrote his commanding officer and asked him. They had dismissed him, but they didn't. He wrote them again, and they did. And that's why we went to Oakwood College, Huntsville, Alabama.
That's an amazing story. You know, the more I hear the intersection that we had, because that is exactly what happened nearly to the T with my parents, because my father was in the Army, and then when the war ended, he ended up going to Oakwood College. So that means that you and your family, you and your husband, and your new family, children, you all came to Oakwood about the same time that my dad and mom did. Is that right? I'm just discovering this. Is that true?
Yeah, about that time, because you weren't born.
You're right about that.
I remember inviting your parents together, and there was John, you know, the oldest boy, John Michael.
Yes.
And I don't think David was born, because David came a little later. They didn't bring David, did they?
Yeah, I think David was born. We'll have to check with him. He might want to hide on that one, but he was born actually while my dad was still in the military in Joplin, Missouri. So that meant that he must have been there.
He was there. He was there. He was there.
That's great. That's great. Now, you came to Oakwood and then you began to teach. And that's when you and I really eventually had our intersection, but you got your degrees both at Oakwood, at Alabama A&M University, and you even received up to a master's degree. Does anybody in your family, of your siblings, or anybody advanced on their education as far as you were able to?
Well, what my mother said to us, that her parents, whoever raised her, did the best they knew and the best they could afford to do for her. And she's done the best she could for us. And she wanted us to do more for our children. And out of the 8 children that my mother, when I was 7 years old, my oldest sister got married. She got married on the front porch, and I was a little girl standing there. But anyway, I'm among the last 3, kind of from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, I'm number 3 coming from the bottom. With my siblings, out of the 8 children, my youngest brother is still living. He's 97.
Wow.
But he is not in as good a health as I am.
Right.
Because he remained a Methodist.
Ah.
And he ate the type of food we ate.
Wow.
And,
So being an Adventist is already shown the difference in the age between your brother and yourself, how far you've gone. That's amazing.
That's the gene.
Adventist lifestyle.
That's the gene. The gene.
Yes.
And my oldest sister lived to be 88. And the next sister was 83.
83. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish off the education thing, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Patti to delve a little bit more into the lifestyle thing, because we want to know, for the benefit of all of our listeners and viewers, we want to know more about your lifestyle. But here's where I got to get this little intersection in. You were I think it was my 4th and 5th grade teacher. Is that right? Did I get that right?
I think it was 3rd and 4th.
3rd and 4th grade teacher. And you better not tell anybody about how bad of a student I was. I don't want to hear that part.
You weren't that bad.
I was a terrible student, but what I have to say is I really appreciated you as a teacher and someone who was concerned. And I just want to thank you for your service, all of those years and all of the kids that you helped to give those values to. I just want to thank you for that, Mrs. Wright. Before we go on to the rest of the part of the interview, I wanted to do that because I have to be able to get that in while we're talking.
Let me ask, I didn't answer your other question. You asked about my siblings and their education. My sister taught school, and she got her degree. And my brother next to her, there were 5 little children we were called. And with the 5, this is Trudy. She got her degree. She taught, retired from teaching. This brother got a master's degree. And when he retired, he was the principal. This is me. I taught, got a master's degree. This is Louis. Louis went to the Army. He went to college, 2 different colleges, but he didn't pursue that. this is the one that's 97 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess you read that book I wrote, you probably saw. And these kids sent their kids to school. You know, these children here. And my oldest sister, son, lived to be in his 90s. She just had one.
Wow.
And, he was a professor.
Wow.
Yeah,
So you have an impressive resume of family members. And by the way, all of your children are very accomplished. And you know something, over the years, I began to understand that you can really value people by looking at their children. And every one of them who I know, and I know all of your children from since when I was a little boy. We have Belvia, we have Brenda, you have Herman, you have Clara. Who did I miss? Did I miss anybody? And every one of them, they're all very, very smart and accomplished people. And it's a testimony to just who you are. And I'm sure they honor you. How many grand and great grandchildren do you have?
I have four grands. How many grands? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 grands. 8? I have 8 grands. I have, 15 great grands?
Oh, wow.
I can remember Belvia had a son and a daughter. And I remember encouraging her to have another baby. I like babies. I like children.
Alexis, let's show some of these pictures. Keep going, Ms. Wright.
To me, you said show some of the pictures.
Go ahead. Don't worry, Ms. Wright. We're going to put the pictures up. Keep going. Keep talking.
Keep talking.
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
want to hear. Yeah.
Go ahead, Patti.
No, I just want to hear more about the educational progress in your family. Do you know that that's one of the main issues today that's coming out with the Black Lives Matters thing, which bringing it to the forefront? You know, we as Blacks don't have the opportunity for education. There's a wide disparity. A lot of, Blacks can't afford to send their kids to school and get an education and to do all that. How were you able to do that? Educate your kids the way you have.
Well, really, what happened, in that book it showed, and I told about my going under the house to pray. And when I went under the house to pray, I was just saying, oh Lord, put a wheel in my heart, turning. And I said that over and over until tears came down my face. And when I came from under the house, I was a little girl. My oldest brother said, that isn't the way to pray. And I felt embarrassed. He said, the way you pray, you ask the Lord for what you want. And so I started asking the Lord for what I wanted. So I asked the Lord about, I had to stay out of school a term because my brother was in college and I had to wait until he got out. But I wasn't discouraged. I was asked, my boyfriend asked me to marry him, but I didn't. And my brother said, when he came out of college, he said, if you get the right people to recommend you, you'll get a scholarship. And of course, I prayed and I did. And when I came out, in those days, there in Quincy, you didn't fill out an application for a job. You went to the superintendent's office. And while I was there, he said, come back next week. And when I prayed to the Lord for this job, and I told him, could I see him? He was in the office, and I saw him. And I asked him if he would assign me to this school that is in walking distance to my house. He said, I've already assigned the teachers there. So I said, well, could you move one and put me there? And they're going to have to pay room and board wherever they are. And he said, are you telling me how to run my office? I said, no, I'm asking you to please do it. And so he said, come back next week. And the next week I came back, he had moved this teacher and put me there. So
Wow.
I was taught and I learned to pray for whatever I wanted, whatever was best for me. And that's why I got this good husband. I prayed to the Lord. And when I went to college, he's the first person I met, but I met others since then. But after he'd finished and I was teaching, we got back together. And so I just depend on the Lord. That's what he's promised. And the next thing is living up to what he promised, living up what he asked you to do. And so I live up to what the Lord asked me to do. And
That's beautiful.
But your great faith. Your great faith, relying on the Lord. I love it.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. You know, Mrs. Wright, you are so privileged to have lived this many years. And now I'd like to get into some lifestyle questions. Patti, in the Adventist lifestyle study, what are some of the major intersections that are associated with longevity? And let's talk to Mrs. Wright and see what her secrets are.
Yes. Well, according to what we found is that, you remember I told you about the blue zones? You've heard of the blue zones, Mrs. Wright? Have you heard about the blue zones?
Oh, the blue zone.
You heard about them? The blue zones where people live over 100 years old, all over the world?
Yeah, I heard about areas where they live over.
Okay, in Japan, Italy, Loma Linda, California is one of the blue zones, the Adventists. Well, they attributed, all of them say the secret to their long life is regular physical activity, for one. What do you do for regular activity? Do you walk?
Okay, now with activity, I don't even know where to start because I read in a little book about walking, and it said if you walk up and down stairs 20 times, it's equivalent to having walked a mile. And by then, all the kids were gone by then. I was walking down, I put macaronis in my pocket. I put 20, and I'd go up the back stairs and come down the front and go back. And I just lay those macaronis. And there's a hill near where I used to live. I'd go up and around that hill. And sometimes my husband would come in. He said, have you walked today? I said, I'll walk, but I'll walk again. I'll walk with him. And so right now, in fact, when my Delvinos moved me here, they brought my treadmill and my bicycle, stationary bike. And so I'm into exercising.
Good. That's the number one. Oh, I'm sorry, go on.
And for my 100th birthday, my brother, who is 97 now, he came and his daughter bought this treadmill that you sit down and do. But I have one like a bicycle that's up. And I have both of them in my room now here in this house. And of course, not only do I exercise and eat, try to eat right. So I don't try, I do eat.
What kind of food? Are you a vegetarian? Are you a vegan? What are you in terms of your eating habits?
I'm a vegetarian. Um, and I said to my husband, I said, I had these babies. I said, by the time the children get big enough to eat meat, we'll leave meat off. And I grew up on meat. On the farm, we had hogs and chickens and whatever. Uh, and I remember the doctor took my mother off pork. And so we just had a whole lot of chickens, and she could eat beef or whatever, but not pork. Anyway, back to the exercising and my food. I take herbs. I'm sure you're familiar with lecithin.
Mhm.
Are you? Raise your hand if you are. Lecithin?
Yes.
Yes. So you do the supplement, huh?
Oh yeah, I take supplement.
What
This
about
is
water? What about water? Do you drink a lot of water?
I don't drink a lot of water, but I guess I drink enough. Now I get water in bottles, and I'll drink 2 of these bottles. Plus, when I take medication or herbs or whatever, or tea, or I get liquids that way. But I don't drink an awful lot of water.
what about stress? How do you deal with stress? Do you have a lot of stress in your life? And if you do, how do you deal with stress?
Oh, stress.
Stress.
I, I, I have the biggest stress I had is when my husband died. That's a serious stress.
The big major one.
And I took it to the Lord. And it is if the Lord had said, I've been waiting for you to ask me. But I was afraid he'd take something from me that I want to hold on to, but he didn't. But I hold on to all the things I want to hold on to with my husband. My first husband.
Now, you say your first husband. We were reading your bio, and we see that at the ripe age of 91, you actually married again, and
Yeah.
that is amazing in itself. You did.
Yeah, I got married again. And
Yeah,
about it,
that's fantastic.
if,
Well, that's
if
a good
I,
story. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
if if I had been holding on to whatever I wanted to get rid of, I wouldn't have married holding on to that, because I should cry every time I go to somebody's funeral. And a friend of mine died, and I couldn't even talk at her funeral because I would have broken down and cried. And the Lord helped me with that.
Yes, yes, we understand. Well, this has been quite amazing, and we want to just continue to honor you and thank you so much for all that you've done in your service to just so many children. Me, one. I just imagine have you counted the number of kids that you've taught over the number of years, Mrs. Wright?
No, I haven't. No, I can't count.
That it must be in the thousands and thousands, would you say?
One thing happened to me in my teaching. I was among the Black teachers that were integrated into an all-white school. There were 3 Blacks at this whole school up to 10th grade. And in my classroom, I had 3 Black children, and the rest were white. So they worked it with 3. And one thing, one of the little girls in my class, a little Black girl, was a motherless child. Her mother's dead, and she lived with her dad and her sister. And she was a needy child. So I asked her to ask her sister if she could go home with me one weekend. And her sister let her come. She was in 6th grade. And so I took the little girl home. And to make a long story short, Belvia and I made her 5 dresses. So she'd have a different dress to wear to school every day. And we bought her other things that she needed. I washed her hair, straightened it out some. Clara had a little coat there she'd worn, and had outgrown it. A growing child outgrows a coat fast. And she came to school with me that Monday morning. And teachers always go by the principal's office to sign in. And the class came to meet me and tell me about Christine. They were so surprised to see her, the way she was. And one little boy said he didn't have a mother. And so I was like his mother. I'd give him $5 for this thing. I looked out for people who needed something, children.
You know, Mrs. Wright, we're going to end, but I just reflect back on a part of your biography, how you grew up in a segregated society. You could have had hatred as a part of your life because you knew of things that happened when you were young, and yet in your life, you were able to dispel prejudice, which hatred and such, which is driving so many things today. There was a story that you tell in your biography of some poor, unfortunate young man who was murdered. And can you tell us that story? And then we're going to end on that, but we want you to tell it and then tell us, how is it that you outlived hatred in your life for other people that were not the color of your skin?
Is this the one that they Okay. At that time, I guess I was about 12 years old. And this Black man was really kind of retarded. And he was accused of attempting to rape this girl. And my brother Frank told me more about it. Truly told me. My sister, 4 years older than me, told me what had happened. And they put him in jail, they said. Frank said.
Now, this was a Black boy and supposedly a white girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And they put him in jail. And Frank said he heard they didn't feed him. And when he got out, they cut him off, cut his private part off and offered him that to eat. And then they hung him on a tree and shot him. And my brother Frank said he didn't feel it because he was told to curse them out and make them mad, and they mainly just shot him. So he was really, according to Frank, dead when they hung him up there. But they shot him and took him down and tied him to a car and drove around the courthouse square. And the sign says this is what we do for niggers when they get out of place. And they took him on the same road by the railroad track and burn him up. And of course, what, I mean, I didn't worry about them, about the white man and whatever. I figured the Lord would take care of me. And I remember memorizing Matthew 5, and it says, love your enemy, bless them that curse you, to do good unto them, and pray for them who persecute you. And on the end it said, and be perfect like your Father's in heaven. It says, he make the sun to rise on the evil and the good, send rain on the just and the unjust. He said, be perfect. And so I said, it takes the Lord to help you to be like that.
Mm.
And so, did you know that was my goal, to be like Jesus?
Wow. Wow.
And not worry about what people do to me, because the Lord will take care of them. I don't have to take care of them. I pray for them. If there's anyone, but it appears that people like me.
So Mrs. Wright,
go ahead.
Mrs. Wright, with all that being said, how do you feel about this movement, the Black Lives Matter movement today?
The way I feel is that Black lives matter, of course they matter, and that the Lord is looking at the situation, and the Lord is going to take care of the situation. And so I think it's right for them to, if that's to march and say Black lives, reminding people that Black lives matter.
Wow.
I mean,
hearing your story.
I don't just hide my face from it. I see it. And I pray for the Lord's will to be done. He's willing that any should perish.
Yes, hearing your story, Ms. Wright, you had every right to hate. You lived through this. It was right there, the pain and the sorrow and the fear that you had to grow up with. But yet, as you moved on and you were helping in education, you took little white girls into your home and you treated people so kindly. God has blessed you with an amazing life. We are privileged to have spent this time with you. We know that maybe we could have a follow-up time another time, because I bet you have a whole lot more stories that you can tell. But we did want to just share this with our listeners and our viewers to be able to benefit from such a thing. Patti, is there anything else that we missed that we want to say before we wrap up for the meeting, for our visit today?
There's just one thing that I cannot get out of my mind, and I keep thinking about it and thinking about it as she was talking. Mrs. Wright, your memory is outstanding. What do you attribute to your outstanding memory? So many people as they age, you know, that's the first thing that goes, your memory. And so what do you attribute your great, fantastic memory to? And this is a final note.
Okay. When I was young, I had this very good memory. Memorized a whole chapter in the Bible. And now the lexicon helps my memory. Like I say, you're familiar with lexicon? I think it helps my memory.
That's pretty good. And by the way, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned it. Mrs. Wright enjoys all of this great health, and she weighs 125 pounds. She wears a nice 10 size clothing, and she's a tall lady. She's not short. Okay. I remember that. And she has all of her teeth, and she's in good shape. How about that, Patti?
There's only one of her in the whole world, okay? Only one.
What a blessing. What a blessing. Mrs. Wright, we're going to let you go. We've taken enough of your time. God bless you. And we want to be back with you at your 110th and beyond.
Such a pleasure.
Okay.
A highlight of my day was meeting you.
Okay. So
Thank you
happy to
so
meet
much.
all of you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Belvia, for also helping us as well. And we know you're in the background. And thank you for what you're doing for Mom, because what you're doing for Mom has saved her to be a treasure for all of us. God bless you and your family.
Thank
Yes,
you.
God bless you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.